because I'm a Londoner that I love London so. Maybe it's because I'm a Londoner.
Hello and welcome to another Joolz Guides guided walk. Today we're going from Trafalgar Square down Whitehall. So let's go.
I get a funny feeling inside of me.
Today I'm a scriber, and as you can see,
I wonder if there'll be
scriber's an
a
artist
chimney
of highest
sweeper there
degree.
today.
Have you seen the smallest police station in London? It's the smallest police station in Britain. It is. Hello, hello, hello. Most people just wander past here and completely ignore this little box, but it's actually the smallest police station in Britain, sort of. I think now it's just like an old smelly broom cupboard or something, but most towns in Britain had one of these funny little lockups where if you were a bit drunk and disorderly, they could just come and slam you in there until you sobered up. This particular one was introduced around 1926, so that the police could keep an eye on the protesters in Trafalgar Square.
What about that lantern on top? Is that anything?
They say that the lantern on top is actually from HMS Victory, which is Lord Nelson's flagship, but I think that's a little bit dubious myself. I'm not entirely sure. Right, and you see those bas-reliefs? They're supposed to be made out of French cannons captured from the Battle of Trafalgar. Did you know that? It's what I heard. Bloke told me down the pub. This plinth remained empty for about 100 years. It was originally designed to hold a statue of King William IV, but they ran out of money and they couldn't make up their mind what to do with it. Now they just put works of modern art on it.
Wonderful big blue cock.
I think he's rather magnificent. I like him. There's a really nice story actually. When Walt Disney came to London, he was on a visit to the National Gallery, which is behind me, and there was someone doing chalk pavement pictures outside, and that's where he got the idea for Burt's character in Mary Poppins. And it's all my own work from my own memory.
Leap of
That's
faith.
what they do in Mary Poppins.
A leap of faith.
These lines were sculpted by a guy called Sir Edward Landseer. He was Queen Victoria's favourite painter. He said, well, I'm not a sculptor, I'm a painter. And she insisted. So first they had to wait several months for a lion to die at the London Zoo. And then they dragged it to his house. And eventually, about 25 years later, they finally got their lions. What's the difference between Fred Astaire and Walt Disney?
I don't know.
Fred dances and Walt Disney.
It's really quite funny.
A lot of people who come to Trafalgar Square probably don't even notice old poor King Charles I up there on his horse. He looks incredibly short, it's amazing. It's the oldest bronze statue in Britain. Did you know that? After the Revolution, Oliver Cromwell, the guy who had King Charles' head chopped off, he ordered for all the statues of King Charles to be taken down and melted down. So this particular one was taken down from Covent Garden where it originally was, and it was given to a man by the name of John Rivet, some typical Cockney. What he actually did is he hid it in his garden. He pretended he'd been melting it down and made a fortune selling funny little trinkets to tourists and stuff like that, saying, this is made from the melted down statue of King Charles I. And he sold them to everybody. Typical wheeler dealer.
As long as he got a quid out of it, that's the main thing.
Yeah, typical Londoner. When King Charles II was reinstated to the throne, the cheeky Cockney rascal brought it back out of his garden and he sold it back to King Charles II, who had it reinstated here, facing down Whitehall towards where his father, King Charles I, who's the bloke on the horse, got his head chopped off. I believe King Charles was actually a bit of a shorty, which is why they had to put him onto that horse so they could tamper with all the dimensions. It still looks a little bit out of proportion if you ask me, but maybe he just looked like that, who knows. You're right in the centre of London, do you know? This plaque on the floor is the point from which all distances are measured in Great Britain. Nice spot for lunch. See, what happened was, back in 1290, King Edward I, that was Edward Longshanks, the mean old bloke who had Mel Gibson hacked to pieces in the film Braveheart. His wife died, and all the way from Lincoln, where she died, to London, along her funeral cortege, he erected 12 crosses. And the final one was called Charing Cross, which was placed here. But it's now been moved to Charing Cross Station, which is over there. Yes.
Well, there you go.
Fascinating, eh?
Learn something new every day.
I've got to show you one of my favourite little oddities about London, and it doesn't include me getting run over. There's a nose poking out from the wall. Yes, behind me is Admiralty Arch, and it's called Admiralty Arch because it's connected to where the old Admiralty building used to be. But you probably recognise it off the TV because that's the road over there, the Mall. When Princess Diana died, the whole Mall was covered in flowers. But my favourite thing about it is the big nose on the wall. Have you tweaked the nose? Many myths abound about whose nose it's supposed to be. It's not mine, it's too small. Some say that it was put there in honour of the Duke of Wellington, who was quite famous for having a bit of a hooter on him. There's 10 of them around Soho. They're called the Noses of Soho, these.
Well, yeah, if you find them all, you get prosperity, don't you?
My favourite one is that this is actually Napoleon's nose, and it was placed there so that when the troops came up towards Buckingham Palace on horseback, it was just high enough for them to tweak it on the way through. It's Napoleon's nose. It was put there so that the troops could tweak it.
Something tells me that ain't the whole story.
Nose.
It's got to be tall. They were actually installed as a sort of art installation by Rick Buckley, who didn't like all the CCTV cameras that were staring at him.
He just put them up there because he reckons everybody's nosy partners.
He's not wrong. Me included.
There's also one on the National Gallery as well.
If you find the other 10 in Soho, apparently it means you're going to become very rich. And there's one ear as well, I think, somewhere. I need to tweak his nose.
Another day when it's not so busy.
It's always busy. I can't. It's not. About just outside the Lord Moon of the Mall, there's a very interesting story about this sign on the pavement down here and how London got its pavements. The story starts over here in Craig's Court. So in 1702, Earl Harrington had this house built because originally the royal court was situated at the Palace of Whitehall, which was just around the corner there. And Earl Harrington thought, I know, how can I best suck up to the royal family? I'll have a house built right next door. So one day, the Speaker of the House of Commons was coming to visit Earl Harrington here in his house. And he came down this narrow alleyway and his coach got stuck. Back in those days, there was nowhere denoting where you should walk and where you should drive your coach and horses. So the poor old Speaker of the House of Commons had to be rather embarrassingly prized out through the roof of his coach, and he got very upset about it and he thought it was most undignified. Worse still, he had to walk all the way back to the Houses of Parliament. The lazy, it was only a 2-minute walk down the road. So he decided if people had curbstones outside their houses, then he wouldn't have got stuck between these buildings. So they voted in a bill through Parliament that said that everybody was responsible for paying for the curbstones outside their own house. And that includes the one over the road here. This used to be the offices of the Royal Admiralty. See, back in the 16th century, Queen Elizabeth I introduced a law that said that all naval property had to have a certain seal on it, the naval seal. That's why the Royal Admiralty had to stamp their seal onto this curbstone, because it was Admiralty property.
Yeah, I never knew that. Did you know that? You can't hear me.
Don't think I can. So the Royal Court used to be based at the palace here in Whitehall until 1698 when it burnt down. The only bit that actually survives is the Banqueting House, which is that building over there. Did you know that? No. No? That's where King Charles had his head chopped off. King Charles I.
You're kidding?
No, they weren't either. He stepped out of a first floor window there onto a scaffold. Look, you can see his head. You see that? That's not his real head.
Yes.
There's King Charles's head.
Poor old King Charles managed to annoy quite a lot of people. First the Scots, then the Irish, and then the English by marrying a French woman. No, it wasn't because she was French. It was actually because she was a Catholic. And the Protestant subjects really objected to this. So on 30th of January, 1649, they had him step out of the first floor window here at the Banqueting House and onto a gallows.
He said, I want to wear an extra shirt because I don't want everyone to think that I'm shivering from fear, because it was quite a cold morning. Okay. You heard that story? He said, the season is so sharp as probably may make me shake, which some observers may imagine proceeds from fear. I would have no such imputation.
I go from a corruptible to an incorruptible crown.
And then all the onlookers dipped their handkerchiefs in his blood as kind of mementos. The executioner actually asked for his pardon, but he refused to give it. I'm not surprised, really, to be honest. Would you pardon someone if they chopped your head off?
Chop. Doesn't feel very nice, does it, Julian?
No, it doesn't.
That's how he felt.
Now, if you've enjoyed my video, please remember to hit the subscribe button, or if you want a private guided tour of London, just get in touch on my website, joolzguides.com. And don't forget to visit my Patreon page, because nobody actually pays me to do these videos, but also just a quick thank you if you can't afford anything. That's fine too.
See you next time, folks.
Town.